So what should that guide hand be doing when you're shooting? That's a big factor that can determine your accuracy on your shot, your consistency, and it's something you can literally fix in seconds. I'm gonna go over the main thing that you should be looking at with your guide hand. Shooting is a very personal thing. Everyone's got their different form, different style, and I'm gonna give you different techniques that you can kind of play around with and see what fits best for you to make sure at the end of the day that the shooting hand is doing what it should be. I've literally seen this make an instant impact in my shooting percentage, making twice as many shots. Players I've trained over and over and over again. Be sure you stay tuned to the end of the video because I'm gonna give you some specific ways to work on this and train it so you can make it a habit. And I'm also gonna give you something that'll help you instantly boost your shooting percentage. It's a different secret that you'll wanna have in your shot for sure. So let's take things from the beginning of your shot. What should your guide hand be doing? I'm gonna be showing you with my left hand because I'm a lefty. If I show you with my right hand, things are gonna look really weird. Guide hand on the start, a lot of coaches say it should be right on the side of the ball and your shooting hand should be directly behind the basketball. I feel like if you can do that, that should be like the prime position if it's comfortable for you. However, a lot of players that's not comfortable for them just maybe because of the way they practice or their natural body mechanics, or they're just used to getting their shot off the dribble, and a lot of times you'll naturally pick up the basketball with your hands on both sides of the basketball, not here, right? So one thing a lot of players will do, and you'll see like Steph Curry do this from time to time, he'll start with both hands under the basketball and he'll kind of rotate to this position from there. And that's completely fine. The goal though is to make sure that at the end of the shot, before you release, you want that guide hand on the side of the basketball, or if you're having guide hand thumb flick issues, trying to get it more in front of the basketball, I found really helped me to get rid of that thumb flick. Now, I know some of you might say, I need that thumb flick, so I'm gonna give you different tips based on that, but if you're the type of player that you know that thumb flick's messing up with your consistency, which it does for most players, putting the hand on front of the basketball can really help with that, because if your hand's in front, you really can't flick the basketball. It would just feel unnatural and awkward. So we got the ball here. Now, if you're the type of player where the thumb flick just for whatever reason works and you have a very consistent shot, hey, cool, roll with it. But most players, myself included, I used to have a really bad thumb flick and it would make the ball basically go up as a knuckleball. There was like no rotation on the shot, and I didn't get a nice soft touch on the rim. So you want to make sure you get that in if possible. So if you're a player that wants to get rid of that thumb flick and guide hand interference issues, what you'll want to do is making sure that you're dropping that hand off before you release the basketball, so you're releasing with just that shooting hand. Now there's a variety of techniques that you can do for this. There's one way that coaches almost always teach you have to do it, but I found they just didn't work for me. So here's some different techniques that you might want to try to put in your game and see which one works for you and add it to your game, okay? So the way that most coaches teach is you should have your hand release off the basketball here, and you know, they'll either just tell you to keep it like your thumb pinned to your hand, so that way that thumb flick isn't an issue, and if your hand's pointing forward like this, then you're gonna not get any interference at all with it pushing it sideways or anything like that. You're not directing it here, you're not directing it here. There's no thumb flick because everything's nice and tight pointing forward, so you know you're dropping it off. For you, if that works, roll with it. For me, that just doesn't work. It just wasn't natural, didn't become a habit for me. What I found really worked for me was tapping my wrist right after the release. That's a big key. You can't tap before you release because then you're gonna throw the shot off. But what I found is if I tap the wrist, what that does is it puts my hand kind of like in this position here when we talk about getting your hand on the front of the basketball. Well, if I tap my wrist, it does that same thing. If my palm is facing this way, I can't flick my thumb onto the basketball, right? So you might want to play around with trying to do that if that works for you. Couple other things that might work. I've seen some players even tap the back side of their shooting hand wrist. That to me, it could work because you're dropping, to get it there, you have to drop it off before you release. That's just giving you a mental cue and something to tactily feel what's going on with this guide hand to making sure that you're being consistent with it. But there is that chance, since you're rotating it back, that you could flick with your thumb. But odds of that happening aren't very good, especially if you aim for the shooting side elbow here. As you'll notice, that hand drops off naturally before I release the shot. One technique you might want to try, Kobe Bryant actually I would see do this quite a bit. He would shoot and he would pretty much drop that hand up real early, right as it's about getting to his face, and he would just have it kind of hanging out way down back here by his waist as that ball is coming up. That might work for you. But at the end of the day, you want to get that guide hand off whenever possible to get that shot consistent. Let's say you've got some thumb flick action going on and that just is what feels comfortable for you. It's what feels natural for you, and you're making your shots with that in and you're not having like consistency issues. Here's what I would recommend you do. Again, whenever possible, me personally, I like to get some sort of a tactile way of being able to feel that my shot feels right, so I can keep my eyes focused on the rim, which we're gonna talk about what you should focus on the rim at the very end of the video. But you wanna make sure you're able to keep your mind and your vision focused on that for the most part, and with your body kind of feel what's happening instead of having to look at your hand, right? You don't want to be focusing on your hand when you're shooting. So when you release the basketball, like one version we had was tapping the wrist here, tapping here, or pinning that thumb so you can feel how that thumb feels pinned to your hand. If you're a thumb flicker, then you'll want to approach things a little different, and you might want to have your thumb on your shooting hand tap right there on your wrist. Since that's the natural position you're doing, you might want to do that. And what that might do for you is get that thumb flick motion. Like if you watch Steph Curry and Kyrie Irving, they both have like a slight thumb flick, but if you watch when they do it, the thumb actually comes off the basketball and flicks before they end up releasing the basketball they're shooting at. So although they have a thumb flick, it's not an actual thumb flick. They're not flicking the basketball into the shot, they're flicking and then it's dropping off and the shooting hand is releasing. So this could kind of help get you to that point where it's more of that type of a release, because if you're trying to hit the wrist here, that means that the shooting hand is carrying up higher and has the basketball last. If you still want to make sure you've got that thumb flick in and actually flicking the basketball, then from there I would focus on just raising up where they meet, and I would try to get your thumb right in between there so you get a consistent thumb flick, at least if you're going to have it in there. So that way when you thumb flick, you know exactly that it's the same every time. Now that we've got all the techniques out of the way, you got to make sure you're practicing this in a way that makes it become habit, right? Working on this is actually really simple. There's just a couple things you want to make sure you're focusing on. So what I would recommend you do is some good old-fashioned form shooting with a twist. When you do it, you want to make sure you're paying attention to that tactile feeling, right? So if you're tapping your wrist, that you're feeling that, whether it's on the front or the back. If you're pinning the thumb, make sure you're pinning the thumb. If you're dropping your hand down, maybe try to tap your side, so you're sure that you're doing that the same every single time. Two other things you'll want to focus on. Number one, what you're aiming for on the rim, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. And number two, what the basketball looks like, looking at the rotation on the basketball. If you're trying to get rid of thumb flick issues, then you'll want to make sure that the basketball is rotating perfectly straight. There shouldn't be any side spin like this. It should be perfectly up and down. So me personally, I like tapping the inside of my wrist. I know that works for me. That's what I'll pay attention to. I'll pay attention to what I'm aiming for, and I'll pay attention to that spin. From there, once you get that down, you might want to step out a little bit further and do things off the dribble, and then gradually maybe work your way out to the three-point line. But I would get lots of repetitions with this first, nice and close, so you can just focus on getting things right. A lot of players like to rush out to the three-point line, and that can make it really hard to make any of this stuff stick. You've got to put in plenty of repetitions, doing it the same way if you want to make it a habit. Now, what you should aim for on the rim, you can click this video right here. It's another YouTube video that'll literally help you improve your shooting percentage in minutes. It was the thing I was talking about at the beginning of the video. Click the subscribe button and the bell icons. You can catch the newest video. See you in that video next.